Fellas, we are live. Let's get it rolling. Welcome into the Day After Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley, joined by Jason Staples, Buck Sanders, and sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Buck Sanders with the Johnny T-Shirt visual there for us. For those of you watching on the YouTube stream, we're live again. Good gracious, folks. We already got couple dozen folks in the stream. What do y'all not have anything else to do on Sunday morning? Carolina 42, Pittsburgh 24. Buck, we were talking a little bit off air. We talked a ton this week. And quite frankly, the entire Inside Carolina team nailed this one. If I need to toot everybody's horn, but before the game, we said Carolina had to be physical and they better step up and meet the physicality of it. It took a while, but your overall take?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would agree that especially in the trenches, the offensive line and defensive line uh, collectively probably had their best game of the season, particularly as you get into the second half. Uh, they really did outstanding work. I mean, I think probably for the first time this season, we saw the defensive line being able to get pressure without having to bring a blitzer. Um, so that's strong. And the offensive line, they only gave up 2 sacks. I think Pittsburgh has averaged 3 a game so far over the season. And I just thought the offensive line did a really good job. They weren't able to create any holes in the run game, but as Mac Brown said post game, they have virtually abandoned the run game at a certain point. And said, "What the heck? We're gonna get more our yards through the air, so let's just do that." But I thought the offensive line did a pretty good job of protecting Drake, and the defensive line did what they needed to do. So in the trenches, I would say that physicality showed up that Mac Brown was talking about also post game, which was very refreshing to see.
Jason, I've watched a lot of Carolina football and a lot of Carolina football in the last decade or so, and meeting the physicality of the other team has, quite frankly, been an issue. I think a fair amount over the years. Not every game. There's certainly been games where Carolina's gone out and smacked people. But against Notre Dame earlier this year, they didn't meet that physicality. Against Notre Dame in the past, they didn't. Against Pittsburgh, they should have won those games, but there was some physical aspect of it that maybe they didn't do it. That was not the case yesterday, especially not in the second half. What'd you see?
I mean, you just basically said what I see. I mean, they match the physicality. Main thing is that they, like Buck said, you look like a much more physical team when your defensive line takes care of business. And at the end of the day, as this game went on, the Carolina defensive line started getting more and more effective. You know, they had their moments where they struggled. And you're gonna have moments where against a good run offense and against a really good running back, you're gonna have some issues. And they had some times where you're looking at it like, man, what in the world? You know, they missed this gap, or what is he doing? You know, getting a high pad level or whatever. You can nitpick different plays from different games, but on the whole, eventually, if you do it right enough times, eventually over time, if you've got talent up front, that's going to start to you're going to start to be able to lean on them a little bit. You're going to start to get some wins up front, and I think that's what happened. Is they started getting adjusted to what Pitt did, and they started getting penetration. They started getting pressure on the quarterback once they got a first or second down stop, and that's the thing. They got some first and second down stops, and the to me the sort of fast track to your team's physicality. You're going to be as physical as your lines are. And we can talk all you want about, oh yeah, they're a really physical football team. Look at how their corners play. Great. But and we did see some physical corner play from from Storm Duck in particular down the end. I mean, Storm closed this game out.
That was
really. What's that?
I haven't seen him do that in 3 years. When he came through and blasted, I thought Jacarius Conley got on the field.
Yeah, I mean, you could see like that guy took some pride in closing this game out. But I mean that's good, but the tone is set by your defensive front. That's especially. And then, your offensive line has to be physical too. And they tell you what, I don't know if anybody watched game day. This is the first time I've had a chance to look at anything game day related all season. And I saw that they had the North Carolina Pitt game on Bears board or whatever it's called. And, he went all in on Pitt, saying, well, Pitt will get after the quarterback. They're really good up front on defense, and North Carolina's offensive line, I think he said something like North Carolina's offensive line is garbage.
Strong words.
Those are real strong words. And he said, look, they've been garbage for like 3 years now, and said something about, I think he even said, been no coaching change or something like that. Well, there has been a coaching change. And I think we saw some of the fruit of that coaching change yet again last night. And they handled their business in terms of keeping Drake Maye upright more often than not, and by a lot. And, they were able to run the football some when they needed to run the football. So that was matching physicality, but the defensive line, that's where it starts. And the defensive line played physical football, especially in the second half. Once they started to kind of figure out the speed of the game and the overall physicality, they matched it, and they got pressure. They got penetration against the run, and it was enough. And this is an improving defense. I mean, there's no bones about it at this point. A lot of the things that I complained about and that I kept pointing out at the beginning of the year, I don't know whether they, whether some of those players that I picked on a little bit, whether they actually watched it or not. But either way, in practice, some of those guys have actually started getting some of those very things fixed. And I'm seeing some of the difference there. It's an improving football team on the defensive side, and they were good enough to win the ACC on the offense before that. So now they're a dangerous football team going down the stretch if they can continue to build on what they've done.
Tommy, to follow up on what Jason said about the defensive line, it doesn't always show up probably as much as other kinds of defensive line splash plays like Kamen Rucker, coming in after the quarterback. But Javory Ritzie had himself a game yesterday. And being able to get pressure like that, kind of basically from the interior, and push the pocket a little bit. He kept almost by himself, kept Slovis from getting comfortable for a lot of the night. He had 2 quarterback hurries and was third on the team in tackles. So he showed up in the stat box, but I think he had a heck of a night. Miles Murphy did some good things. Some other defensive linemen got some pressure, but it wasn't just like from the jack position or from the end position. They were getting pressure across the line, which allows Chizik to do different things defensively.
It was fascinating to watch the turnaround, because in that first half, Pitt was just, Mac said post game, and I think it surprised everybody. They came out throwing it, and Carolina just couldn't find the receivers to get on them. I mean, I think I tweeted at one point, a lot of people said, do you just leave? Why not just leave the corners on the island and sell out to stop the run? Well, you saw why that was problematic to start the game, because they would just throw over the top and make some plays. But Jason, your point about Storm Duck, I mean, that guy, he played his butt off in the second half, and especially late down the stretch. Looked like a completely different guy. I thought Legend Cavazos came in and made some plays over there. And the point about it is improving. A couple points. One, they clearly listen, right, Jason? They clearly listen to what's said on these podcasts.
Yeah.
We know that factually. But they Pitt tried to bully them, I thought, early and it worked to a certain extent. And Abacande, it's early.
Abanaconda.
Abanaconda, early. I mean, he was shorter and smaller than I thought he was. He's still thick, but he had spaces. But Buck, to the defensive line's point, that space went away.
Yes.
I mean, it was, and whether it was a shift by Chiswick or an adjustment or whatever, I think it was guys just stepping up and realizing, hey, we got to do something. But they did it with everybody out there. Noah Taylor went out. My non-trained eye says that does not look good for Noah Taylor. Des Evans went out. Rucker stepped up. Malachi Hamrick was in there. Ritzy, Murphy, all these guys were making plays. This is a banged-up team in that second half that could have wilted, and they didn't. And I think that speaks more than anything else. I think that speaks well for what Chiswick and this defense is trying to get done.
Well, I think the answer you're walking around over there is that depth. They have been building some depth over the course of the year. They're getting guys some playing time, and that started a little while ago. Now they have flipped that switch off and on a few times. They played a lot of guys like against Virginia Tech, not so many against Miami, but they have been slowly and surely working some guys in. Travis Shaw got some snaps. Some other people got into the game. So what they're beginning to show is that they do have some depth on defense, and they were going up against a very senior or older offensive line. Pittsburgh's offensive line, they're not having a lot of redshirt freshmen and sophomores out there for those guys. So, hats off to the defensive line and the showing that they had. And we could talk about the other side of the ball, too. I think the North Carolina offensive line played well. And Jason has already spoken to that a little bit also.
Yeah, I definitely want to go there. I saw Jack McNeil doing the gritty in the locker room, which is pretty cool to get all the old guys out there to try to dance and one up Mac. But Jason, what a lot of people are asking in the chat, and a lot of people say, did you see, and I know it's tough on first watch, and I definitely haven't watched it since it happened last night, but did you see Carolina doing anything differently on the back end after in the second half? Because it looked more effective. What'd you see there?
Not on the first watch. I didn't see them in terms of scheme doing a whole lot differently, but at the end of the day, what you do schematically doesn't matter as much as whether or not you're able to get after them up front. I mean, the exact same coverage when you've got a quarterback who's throwing from a clean pocket versus a quarterback who's, throwing from pressure is a very different coverage look. So I think the biggest difference is that they started getting pressure. And here's the thing. I don't want to overstate how well the Carolina defense played on the whole on the night. Because, I mean, they did, as you guys mentioned, they gave up some big plays. They gave up plays down the field. I'm looking at the quarter by quarter summary. Through the first half, Pitt was averaging 5.7 yards per play. That's not great. That's not terrible defensively, but that's not great. You want to be a little bit better than that if you can, but that's okay. Then in the third quarter, they gave up 10 yards a play. That's not real bad, right? That's App State type stuff. You give up 10 yards a play, that's bad. And then fourth quarter, 3 yards a play. That's where the ball game was won. That's where Carolina went on a 21-0 run in the fourth quarter. The defense forced a turnover, and they gave up 3 yards a play. All of a sudden, that's when it clicked. All of a sudden, it was, okay, game on. This team learned something about how to close this game out. They figured out what they're doing a little bit. And the other thing I do want to highlight here, and this gets to something Buck said in the pregame. Buck, you said you felt like maybe the most important factor coming into this game was Carolina finding a way to get up early so that they could control the game. And they didn't get up early, but here's the thing. As soon as they did go up,
it was over.
The ball game was over. And that's where once they got up, the defense, that's when the switch flipped defensively, because I think it wasn't so much that Carolina did a whole lot differently defensively. It's that Pitt had to change a little bit of what they were doing. So when the offense got to 28-24, and it's the beginning of the fourth quarter, and Pitt realized, like, we're in a shootout now. We're gonna have to score. All of a sudden, ball game shifted, and the defense was able to take advantage, and that's complementary football. That's where you're okay. I mean, we saw some of this in the prior coaching staff. Of, okay, we'll be willing to give up some, a drive here or there, as long as we get the ball back to our offense, which is then going to score, going to continue to put pressure on their defense, and then put pressure on their offense to score. And we'll give up some points as long as we get some turnovers and some things as a result of whatever the opposing offense is going to have to press to score as much as this offense is going to score. Well, you still have to have good enough defense to do that. You've got to, ultimately, they ran into some problems at the quarterback position down the stretch there. What they're doing right now with Drake Maye on offense and that whole group, they're putting so much pressure on the opposing offense. You're going to have to score 40 to beat this Carolina team, unless you've got a Clemson-type defense. And even then, you still might have to score 40. That puts an awful lot of pressure on the opposing offense. And that's when your defense, at some point, it just takes a couple wins and it takes a turnover, that sort of thing. And all of a sudden the game shifts. All of a sudden they're playing from behind, and they play it a little differently. And then the defensive line eats. And that, I think, is what we saw.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best back and forths we had during the week talking about this game, and you mentioned it, Jason, and Buck, kind of all together here, is Pitt wants to get ahead and then eat the football and just make everybody watch them run it down Carolina's throat. Carolina wanted to get ahead to force Pittsburgh to do something out of their norm. I think the point that Jason made is, even if Carolina gets behind, you still got Drake Maye. And I don't want to go to the Drake Maye portion of the program right now. We'll do that after the break. But their ability to settle down even when they were behind was fascinating. Looking at the big plays, Pitt had 5 passing plays, count as big plays, for 181 yards. But the last one of those big plays was 12:51 in the third quarter. After that, nothing. And they had only three rushing big plays. The last one of those was 6 minutes in the third quarter. I mean, it was like somebody turned the faucet off on the Pitt sideline, and they couldn't get it back. But a couple more things about the defense. We mentioned depth. We mentioned ability. But I felt like, and Jason sort of alluded to it, it was kind of like sharks smelling blood out there. Right, they started getting some success, and we always talk about Miami's a front-running team. This Carolina football team, when they started having success on defense, it just sort of built and built and built, and we haven't seen that. I mean, we haven't seen it consistently in Max 2.0, hell, in 10 years. You've watched a lot of football. What were you thinking watching it just sort of building, like the tidal wave was building, pouring over on Pitt's offense?
Well, two things, and I think Jason's already touched on this a little bit, but when it was 17-7 and when it was 24-14, it never really felt like North Carolina had lost touch with Pittsburgh. They were still within striking distance, and that factor, I think, began to wear on Pittsburgh. Especially as North Carolina closed the gap and then took the lead at 28-24. When that happened, you could almost see that switch you're talking about getting flipped on the Pittsburgh side of the field, because North Carolina, and they just weren't letting Pittsburgh get too far out in front of them, that they couldn't make a push to catch up in relatively short order. And when you've got an offense that can strike quickly, as this offense can do. And instead of shouting out Drake Maye right here, Anton Green had himself a game. I mean, he was a monster in this game. And having him along with Josh Downs, this offense can put up points. I mean, and as Jason was talking about, you may have to score over 40 points to beat this North Carolina team here on out. So, yeah, I agree with you, Tommy. Something froze up a little bit on Pitt on the inside of those players once North Carolina got up on the scoreboard.
Let's go to Johnny T-Shirt. Buck, hold your shirt up for the YouTube folks. Johnny T-Shirt, friends of this podcast, friends of Inside Carolina, friends of Inside Carolina's premium subscribers, friends of everybody, really. They're such a great bunch over there on East Franklin Street. Alumni owned and operated. They take care of us. They take care of you. Get your 10% off when you're Inside Carolina premium subscriber. I think a certain president asked me yesterday on the Inside Carolina live show in the Bowls lot, if you're not a member of the Inside Carolina Premium Message Boards, what are you doing? So anybody watching this YouTube stream or listening on these are great avenues of content. The podcast, the YouTubes, all that stuff. Got a wonderful team that can put together some solid stuff. But the premium message boards are where it's at. We've talked about recruiting here. Don Callahan has that covered. You see who these guys are before they get to Carolina, what to expect. And then you've got Jason Staples throwing up just ridiculous film breakdowns, who's personally, for me, one of my favorite things. But then on top of all the premium stuff you get with Inside Carolina, you get Johnny T-Shirt. They deliver it straight to your door. If you don't want to get to Chapel Hill or can't, they deliver it to your door at johnnytshirt.com. And it's almost holiday season, folks, so get everything you need. National Guys Pay the Bills on the audio. It is the day after Pittsburgh edition. We'll be right back. All right, day after podcast, InsideCarolina.com. Buck Sanders, Jason Staples here. We're doing this live at 8:23 on the East Coast. Got a couple hundred folks in here with us. Appreciate you guys joining us. If you're listening to this later, come on and get into the coffee party. Consider it Amen Corner, like down at your local McDonald's, where you sit around and shoot the breeze and talk about Carolina football. Let's get into the Drake Maye portion. Buck, you mentioned Antoine Green. Yes, we'll talk about him. Josh Downs, yes, we'll talk about him. Jason, Drake Maye is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. The kid, it looks like a shark bit him. He's bleeding terribly out of his hand. He doesn't even miss a beat. He looked like a couple throws where he was, I'm running. Nope, there's somebody open. I mean, just overall, what'd you see Saturday night?
Well, we saw why, in my view, Drake Maye will be not just a top 5 pick, but probably the number 1 pick in the draft when he comes out.
No question.
And I mean, what you see when you have that kind of player is he gets hit, he gets, you get pressure on him or whatever. And those kind of guys don't, and you saw this from Narduzzi talked about this in the pregame, right? And before the game, it was a interview, a couple days before the game, where he talked about the difference between the quarterback last year, obviously Sam Howell, and Drake Maye. And everything he said was accurate. He talked about that. I'm going to read the quote. When I watched last year, as good as their quarterback was, if he didn't feel good, he would just tuck it and run or get hit and sacked. Now, folks on Inside Carolina will remember that was something that I kept saying, and folks kept getting mad. But it was the truth. Great deep ball thrower, a guy that when things were good, when he felt good about what was going on, could really put the ball in there, but had some flaws in terms of processing speed to get the ball out and, just managing things when read one wasn't there. Here's what Narduzzi then said. This guy is not like that. He's elusive. He's really smooth in the pocket. There's time when he's just shuffling to the left away from it and he feels the pressure well. He's as good a quarterback. We were talking as a defensive staff. We were discussing, like, who is this guy like? He's like a Trevor Lawrence is what I think he is. He can throw every ball. He's not afraid to put it out there. He is talented. Now, I think the Trevor comparison is a little different because I think Trevor had a stronger arm or has a stronger arm in terms of just being able to just from any body position make, laser type throws to any point on the field. And that's not to take away from Drake Maye has a terrific arm. But here's the thing. I think Drake Maye right now in as far as I would grade what I value in a quarterback might be a better prospect than Trevor Lawrence was at this stage of their careers.
Uh-oh, them high praise now.
And the reason is, Trevor, first of all, Trevor played on an offense that, and also had the support of a defense that was just, it was silly what he had around him. Now, look, with Josh Downs, with the way that Antoine Green is playing, it's not like Drake Maye is playing with a bunch of stiffs. But to me, the thing that I value as much as anything else when grading a quarterback is the ability to slide in the pocket, to get the ball out quickly against pressure, to be able to handle some of those things. That's where Drake Maye is as good as anybody. And when you have those guys that okay, we're going to blitz them, we're going to pressure them, we're going to get in their face. You have that kind of guy who's like, oh, good, game on. I love it when teams do this because now I can get it out quickly and I've got my one-on-ones. Then those guys are terrifying to play against for a defensive coordinator. And that's what he is.
Yeah. As long as we're in the Drake portion of the program, here's the thing that just gives you a great look at who Drake Maye is. Slovis hit 3 Pittsburgh receivers. 3 Pittsburgh receivers caught a pass last night. Drake hit 10 different guys. 10 different guys. What does that tell you? Drake sees the entire field. And if you get open, he's going to get you the ball. Now, granted, we will see some times where some people are open and Drake doesn't get them the ball and for whatever reason, but his ability to scan the entire field and have the arm to get it to where he wants to go accurately is just unparalleled. And what's a little bit of a shame, in his press conference after the game, Mac Brown almost sounded apologetic towards Sam Howell and the previous offense because he was comparing how they were unable to finish at Pittsburgh the last 2 times they played up there, having the ball on the 2-yard line with minute 16 to go. I'll never forget that as long as I live. He keeps always bringing up a minute 16 to go, 1st and goal at the 2, and couldn't close the deal. Drake Maye would have got that ball in the end zone. I have complete confidence one way or the other. He'd have won the game for North Carolina. And, as much as we love Sam Howell and as much as we love those teams, there's just a significant gap between what Sam Howell's able to accomplish on the football field and what Drake Maye can do. And I think a lot of that stems from, yes, he has all the physical abilities in the world, and as Jason talks about and I've talked about at times, but his vision, I think, and having the accuracy to get the ball where he wants to go, those are the things that separate him, in my opinion.
Yeah, a couple of throws, and when you see it from different angles, he was throwing balls when guys were not open, and he would throw them open and get into them on time and all. One thing that I do want to mention, we highlighted Tyler Wiltz's comments, the linebacker for Pitt, earlier in the week. We're going to hit him if he doesn't get up. It's not our problem. Well, number 8, Clancy, did just that, and I think that's when the game flipped. He tried to take him out. He can make a tackle. He targets him. There's a couple things. So I watch these games pretty objectively. Clearly, the outcomes matter. But when I see chippiness and what I consider to be some BS plays, that gets the blood pumping. And I think that happened with North Carolina as well, is you can't stop him, so I'm going to try to hurt him. And what happens there is you just fire him up more, and then you're sitting on the sideline watching. And while you're sitting on the sideline watching, he's doing your team dirty. After that, Jason, the toughness and the leadership. We had Landon Turner on the Inside Carolina Live pregame, which I got to get a guy on the podcast because he was fantastic. But he talked about having a guy like that behind you and making plays like that. You cannot overstate. We can talk about his production, but you can't overstate the dude that's back there. I mean, just from your perspective, take away all the physical abilities, take away all that. It's just another level on the leadership, the fight, the grit, and all that. I just think it's ridiculous. Help me here. Help me quantify it, because I've never seen anything like it. And I've seen a lot of good football players, and he's a redshirt freshman, and he keeps doing it over and over and over. Greg Barnes said in the game plan, remember this? This game's going to be a struggle, but I have faith in Drake Maye getting it done. And Drake Maye got it done.
It's what we keep saying on all of this. And there's a certain, I think you're right to a degree that when that hit happened, and you could see, kind of knock some cobwebs out a little bit, and then, he cuts his hand up. Drake Maye has almost you could see it in sort of in the immediate aftermath of that. You could see almost the famous Training Day scene from Denzel Washington. The okay, all right. You could that, like, that mentality is there that with Drake Maye. You can see that when teams start to get after him a little bit, he has that reaction. Like, oh, okay, all right. So that's how it's going to be. So that's what we're doing here, huh? All right, well, and then you see him just kind of turn it up a little bit. And I want to highlight here. Here's his numbers when blitzed from last night. So you wanted me to quantify this. When blitzed, he was 12 of 19, 63% completion percentage for 98 yards. So that's not a bunch of yardage, but two scores, zero turnovers against the blitz. Right? When under pressure. So when, not just when the blitz got there, but when pressure got there, he was 9 of 14, 64% completion percentage, 8.6 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, 0 scores, zero turnovers. Look, and that's just the passing numbers, by the way, because he also had multiple scrambles. He had 3 scrambles in there as well that went for positive yardage. And how many times was he sacked?
Twice,
according to this. I don't even remember once, but
twice.
Yeah, twice.
Yeah, one was he was stepping up enough that, he kind of made it into almost a no loss. So you're looking at a guy that even when he's under pressure, you're not getting negative plays for your team because he gets it out so fast that he's not and gets it out reliably when he's under pressure, so that your offense is just not taking negative plays. And that just makes things so much easier for him and everybody else around him. And again, if you're going 64% completion percentage under pressure, there are a lot of quarterbacks around the country that are under 64% completion percentage.
Period.
Clean.
Yeah.
And now clean, by the way,
it was ridiculous.
Clean, he was 82.8% completion percentage for 9.1 yards per attempt, 4 scores and no turnovers. And his adjusted completion percentage, by the way, I should bring this in as well. Pro Football Focus keeps an adjusted completion percentage stat that accounts for drops, and other factors. His adjusted completion percentage when clean, so when he was not under duress, was 89.7.
That sounds good. Is that good?
Yeah. When he was not blitzed, his adjusted completion percentage was 95.8. So if he's playing against air, you got no shot. But again, when under pressure, his adjusted completion percentage was 69.2. That means he's putting it in the correct spot with accuracy 70% of the time when under pressure. This is not just when blitzed. This is when he's actually got a guy in his lap. There is your quantification in terms of quantify this for me. Yeah. Adjusted, by the way, adjusted completion percentage on 20 plus yard throws yesterday was 75%.
We are getting
Good
spoiled.
luck with that, defensive coordinators.
Yeah, it's going to be terrible when he finally departs UNC, because
you'll never see anything like this.
We'll never see it again, I don't think.
No, it's one of those things where now I will say Clemson did see this a couple times in a row. I mean, they went from Deshaun Watson to the elf, and
Taj Boyd wasn't chopped liver either.
But see, Taj Boyd was their Sam Howell.
Yeah,
right. He was a really good player with some limitations in some of the same areas actually, and put up filthy numbers, but set the table for Deshaun Watson, who was their Drake Maye. Now they were able to go out and find an elf who happened to be willing to sign on and say, you guys, and this is the thing that happens. You get a Drake Maye who looks like that, and all of a sudden that stimulates the imagination of future quarterbacks for recruiting to say, that guy looks pretty good in that offense. I wonder if I, who have similar skills in certain areas, can, look similar in that offense. So I don't think you'll ever see a guy like Drake Maye in Carolina blue again. I mean, he's a generational guy, but you might see somebody who's a top tier guy and, a high draft pick, maybe even a, top 5 draft pick or number 1 draft pick again, decide to sign in and play for North Carolina for that offense, precisely because then, this year and next year he sees what can be done if you're an elite quarterback. So that's the hope. But I would definitely say enjoy this while you got it, because even if you sign the number 1 quarterback in the country coming out of high school, the odds that he looks anything, that he reaches this level are really, really, really slim. I mean, you're looking at a couple quarterbacks, fewer than a handful of quarterbacks every decade that look like this in college. Probably a handful every decade. There's one every couple years that looks something like this.
Here's a question, and Tommy, you can chime in on this too. Taylor Viplis was chattering in his review after the game that Drake might get an invite to New York. Is anybody seeing that?
I haven't seen it, but I think he has to. If Carolina can finish this 10-2, like somebody predicted, or something like that, Jason, don't you think he's got to at least get there? I mean, we're getting ahead of our skis, but that would be gigantic for this program if that happened.
If he's not there, I'll preface this by he has to continue playing at the level that he's been playing at, right? If he continues to play at the level he's been playing at, and he doesn't end up in North Carolina, if he doesn't end up in New York, then I'll be the first one screaming bias, basically big traditional power bias, because if Drake Maye were playing for any other 1-loss or fewer team in the country right now, so I'm talking about, let's see, Alabama. Alabama's got 1 loss, right? Look at Hendon Hooker right now. He's playing great for Tennessee. Hendon Hooker's numbers are nowhere near what Drake Maye is putting up right now. Now, Hendon Hooker is in the discussion because they beat Bama. I get it. But if he were playing for any of those teams, so you're looking, let's go down the list. If he were playing for Bama, Ohio State, USC, Georgia, Tennessee, who else is a 1-loss or fewer team right now? You can get the list. If you were playing for any of those teams, he would be probably the Heisman frontrunner right now. Now, some of that is a factor of North Carolina has not played a bunch of power teams. I mean, the best team North Carolina's played was Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is a 3-loss team right now. Right? So some of that is people going, well, he's put up great numbers, but I mean, they played FAMU, they played App State, and they played Georgia State where, you can kind of put up those numbers. That's part of it. But I think another part of it is like, can the best football player in America really be playing at North Carolina right now? I think that's also part of it in the psychology of your typical national media type, Heisman voter type. So to me, if he continues to play like this through the rest of the season, he should be in New York. And if he plays anything like this against Clemson, and I'm just going to assume that they're going to be they're what, a 96% chance at this point of being in the ACC championship game.
I think North Carolina's moved to 98 something.
Well, there you go.
Talking about Clemson.
If he keeps putting up those numbers and they're able to give Clemson, they don't even have to beat Clemson, but if they're able to, score 40 points or something like that against Clemson and force that Clemson team to sweat because he plays like that, honestly, I think he should be the Heisman frontrunner with the kind of season that he's had. I don't think he would win it because, again, the factor of like how many big games, how many marquee games against top 10 teams will he have played? That's a factor in this. But he would be in New York and I think would be potentially the favorite to win it going into next year. Now, next year's going to be harder because I don't think he's going to have two of those receivers that are awfully good for him. But he showed he could do it with a bunch of other guys early in the year, which, kind of tells you that next year you could kind of expect it to look pretty good too.
Some of those guys had some really good catches too last night.
Yep.
Gavin Blackwell had made a heck of a catch. And of course, Kobe was wide open and Pacer for his touchdown. But, as you say, first several games of the year, Drake had neither one of those. And again, he's hitting 10 different receivers a game. So I think he'll find the targets he's looking for next year.
Let's talk about those targets, and we got a couple more things, and I know we're wanting to get out of here by 9 a.m. Josh Downs, Antoine Green, I saw some list, and it's some stupid list you see on social media or whatever. They were like the 10th best passing receiving duo in the country. But we talked a lot about Dimey Brown. No, you go ahead and get in, Jason.
Yeah, they're not top 10. They're top probably 3 or 4.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not Ohio State. No, Ohio State has just lost 2 guys to injury. But that's the best group in the country. But I think this Carolina group is at least top 5.
And what they're able to do, they still get it done. But Buck, your point there, it opens up the door for so many other guys to catch balls, and that's the difference I see from this year and last year. Josh Downs doesn't have to be force-fed to get 11 catches for 102 yards. It didn't seem like, my God, throw it to somebody else, man. Somebody else is open. And Green goes 10 for 180. I'll let you talk about it, Jason, but Buck, Jason said this is a money game for Antoine Green. Well,
and it was. Yeah.
Did he make himself some money?
It was, yeah. He got cha-ching all over the place was what he was hearing.
But it's just just speak to the receivers. I mean, we've seen a lot of good ones come through Carolina, but never this. Lonnie Galloway has put together a room that the talent is everywhere, and it's being used, and it's being taken advantage of, I guess is the word I'm looking for, every day by Drake Maye.
Yeah, I guess it was Downs or Green, one of them, that last night were talking about it post-game about how both of them make the other one better. And that's the case really you see at every level of football, particularly in the NFL. If you've got a wide receiver one on a team that's just excellent, his numbers are probably going to get better if you bring in another guy that's as good as he is, because teams can't focus on him. in that first half, Josh Downs had what, 2 or 3 catches maybe in the first half, and for not a lot of yards. I think at one point he had 2 catches for 8 yards, fairly far along in the first half. Meanwhile, Green is burning it up. Green had 100 yards in the first half. So, if you're going to bring some help to shut down Josh Downs, the toothpaste is going to squeeze out the other end of the tube, with Green catching the ball. So those two really make each other better, and it's great to see that Josh Downs has a guy that he didn't have last year, that teams just can't concentrate on him. And they've done some different things with Downs too this year. That's helped, and he's not always operated out of the slot, but Green makes Downs a better player, and vice versa.
Yeah, Jason, we'll talk about the receivers forever. We talked about Drake May forever. Let me ask you about, before we get out of here, and I'll let you guys close the show with whatever you want to talk about, but can you speak to the offensive line play, what you saw yesterday? They were getting – it looked to me that Pitt was sending extra guys every single time. I mean, they were coming from all sides, and number 8 was a big factor in that. When he went out, it changed a little bit. But can you speak with how to handle it? One of my favorite moments watching this team is when Corey Gaynor got a little chippy with some of those guys. And that's the kind of stuff I love. If you're going to sit here and talk, then like you mentioned the training day reference earlier, okay, we can do this if this is how you want to go. Speak to what you saw from Bicknell's OL last night.
Well, I mean, they played well enough. I think that's my take on this. Is they played well enough to give their dude a chance. That's all you really need from that group right now. I would have liked to have seen a little bit better hold up over the course of the game, where there are fewer than 19 pressures on your quarterback. They did bring a lot of pressure, but the thing that I think was probably the best aspect of this is that they were pretty solid guard to guard in terms of when there was leakage. It was not straight up the middle, in terms of Gaynor getting beat, or actually William Barnes had the highest pass block grade on the team in terms of the offensive line.
Him coming back was huge.
Him coming back, and that was something that I did want to make sure I talked about in this day after, is William Barnes being out there changes the complexion of that offensive line. Adorno he's clearly a backup, and he's nowhere near as good at that right guard position as Barnes. Barnes has been solid when he's played this year, when he's been healthy enough to play, and him playing in this game may have been the difference in the game, because ultimately there was enough time for Drake May to step up in the pocket on a number of occasions, or to slide to space that was there, because there was space that was there. It was not a situation where 3 guys were getting beat at once very often. And what the at the least that you ask from your offensive line in pass protection is to get run over slowly. Right? That's what you want, is like at least put yourself between them and your quarterback and provide, slow them down enough that he can do something. And we saw that over and over again, and it was good enough. Spencer Rowland, did he have his best day? No, but it was good enough. Asim Richards was, he had a little better day overall, but was it his best day? Is it one that, he's going to point to that game and be like, okay, that's the reason you should draft me? Not really. But again, across the board, they played well enough, and they did a good enough job picking up all the stunts and all the blitzes and all of that Pitt threw at them. And, I also want to highlight the running backs did their job in in pass protection when they needed to against the blitz. DJ Jones had 4 blitz pickups that were significant in this game. Omarion Hampton had 1 key blitz pickup. You had Elijah Green picked up the blitz 13 times. Right? The backs did their job as well, and they deserve some credit in terms of being able to help keep Drake Maye upright with enough time. Now, again, he makes all of those guys look better because of how quickly he gets it out, because of how he slides to daylight, because of all of the little things that are, the things that I value really heavily in a quarterback. The stuff that I've talked about for several years of I want my quarterback first and foremost to make quick decisions, get the ball out. Secondly, I want, with accuracy, of course. And secondly, I want him to understand and feel, to have that feel in the pocket to where he knows how to slide and how to make time for himself and how to make his offensive line and his pass protectors right while keeping his eyes downfield. Maye does that as well as anybody in the country. But these guys, I'm seeing people saying, in chat, Drake Maye, maybe not the GOAT, but definitely the Ram. But, this, that's pretty good. This is the thing is he makes them all look better. But if they're just getting beat right off the snap, then there's not a whole lot of room to make a guy look better when he's just getting run by. And those guys did enough. They're communicating enough. They're at least starting in the right spot. And when they're getting beat, it's because the guy across from them is pretty good. So I think that's the thing I want to highlight with them is, are they the top offensive line in the ACC? No. Are they even a very good offensive line? Probably not. But are they pretty good? Yeah, they've played pretty well this year, and they've played well enough that their quarterback, who continues to make them look better, has made them look really good at times. And I think that's where they're at.
The Pittsburgh defense, announced their intentions earlier in the week about Drake Maye and, getting to him and this, that, and the other. And you knew, and they attempted to bring as much pressure on Drake Maye as they could get away with putting on him. And they had, and actually this stat eludes me in trying to define it, but there was 3 quarterback hurries for the Pittsburgh defense. 3. And North Carolina had 6. So that tells you that North Carolina was putting about as much pressure on Slovis as Pittsburgh was able to put on Maye. So, that's why I think we started out by talking about how much better they looked in the trenches as far as the D line getting its job done. And, there's a lot of keys to this game. And it's fun to talk about. It's fun to talk about games like this. But the most encouraging thing to me moving forward is the play of the defensive line. I mean, we knew Drake Maye was amazing. We knew Josh Downs and Antoine Green are amazing. We know they can score points. But moving forward, finishing out the rest of this year, and think about it, they may play 6 more games at least. So the advancing expertise and success of the defensive line is the most encouraging thing to me now and even going into next year.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some injuries. There was some significant guys getting beat up last night, but their depth and going forward has been able to take care of that yesterday. Buck, your hat rack is very popular in the YouTube chat. I think we need to get you to sign a few of those and pass them out in the Bowls lot.
Sure.
And we shall do that. But I'm going to wrap it. I don't know what else we can talk about.
One guy was asking if all the hats were the same. They're not. I've got a few standards that I lean on from time to time. But
you got your Sunday hat, your Monday hat, your Sunday.
Yeah,
afternoon
there
hat.
you go.
Jason, you got anything left before we get out of here? I know you're going to have some film breakdowns this week, and we'll talk, of course, later in the week on the game plan for UVA. Anything short to get out of here?
Only thing I'm going to say is Drake Maye can still be better. He can still get better.
Scary.
Yeah, he can still get better when he tightens up some of the mechanics and some of the things that lead to. And Buck, you mentioned, one missed throw in particular, but there are a couple that he missed where it's like, oh man, like, come on, dude, like you can make that throw. I'm thinking of the one that he skipped to Drake Maye, and it was just because he didn't get adequate torque on the run into his throw. There are times where it's just a little bit of sloppiness with mechanics and believing that he can kind of throw from any position with all arm. Once he figures some of that stuff out and really tightens up even more and becomes more and more of a sort of a student of the craft, that guy can be that much better. That's why I keep saying, like, he's as good an NFL prospect as anybody for a long time, because he's this good and still has a lot more ceiling in terms of all those other things. There's still little things that he can clean up, that he can be that much better. And that's scary.
Yeah. I always say, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. That boy pretty good. and to your point, he can get a lot better. Buck Sanders, Jason Staples. It's been the Day After podcast. Shout out to the 300 plus that have joined us on Sunday morning. It's good to finally talk about a game that was won on the field and people still aren't ticked off for whatever reason. 7-1.
I think we could probably find one or two that are something about something.
I think there was one or two in the group chat. We're gonna have to take one of their phones away during the ball game. But it's been a pleasure, guys. Jason Staples, as always. Buck Sanders is the man. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. It's been the Day After podcast. Got a lot of content coming this week for Inside Carolina, and of course, Virginia game at noon next Saturday. We'll talk about that a lot. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. Support them. We'll see you guys next time.